Despite my love of all things Japanese, which developed from quite a young age, I had never really been into anime that much, to be honest, until I watched Fullmetal Alchemist. This series, like many others, did away with the misconception that anime was just for kids, and beautifully told its story through complex and deep characters. Of course, I am talking about the original Fullmetal Alchemist, not Brotherhood here. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which in part is a remake of the original anime and aims to be closer to the manga, is almost universally praised above its original iteration. I have always disagreed with that. I think the original is far superior in almost every way. So in this video I'm going to try and explain why, in my opinion, it is better. So when I originally heard that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was out, I was desperate to watch it. I had such fond memories of the original anime. It was my favourite anime and it always has been. But then I started to watch it, realised that it was pretty much a remake and a lot of the same things were happening. I was really disappointed, to be honest. But it wasn't just that, it was that the way they were being retold wasn't anywhere near as effective. The first episode sets the tone for what's to come, really. Take the introduction of Edward Elric, for instance. A lot of characters are introduced in the same way. There's sort of information dumps about the characters where one character will just say, you are the Fullmetal Alchemist, you did this, this and this, and you are like this. Whereas in the original, it all felt like a big journey that you were going on with the Elric brothers, and you were being introduced to the characters alongside them, really. It's all about the pacing of the two animes. Like, if you compare the two, Brotherhood has an incredibly fast pace throughout the entire anime. A lot of the episodes, and we're talking incredibly iconic parts from both the animes here, such as the Nina Tucker storyline, are told in Brotherhood just in one short episode, whereas in the original it felt more like a journey. The entire anime did, because the original took its time building everything up bit by bit and introducing characters slowly over time, and also it felt like a lot more time had passed. Like, Ed and Al age more in the original, I think, or at least it makes it more pronounced when they update the character design to show that they've aged. Again, this could not be exemplified more than the very first episode, because when people say that Brotherhood is better because it's closer to the manga, I have a few things to say to that. Number one, I don't care how close it is to the manga. If it's better, it's better. If it's worse, it's worse. It doesn't matter how close something is to the original source material. I think the original managed to tell a better story with the setting of Fullmetal Alchemist than both the manga and Brotherhood did. Also, one of the best, most impactful scenes, which got me hooked on the anime immediately, was the very first scene in Fullmetal Alchemist. And that scene is actually taken from the manga, whereas the first scene in Brotherhood isn't anything to do with the manga. And again, less time is given in Brotherhood to build up the city of Leto, and that comes back into play in the original Fullmetal Alchemist in a really big and impactful way, where they realise that they haven't actually saved the city because the war is still going on there. But the idea of introducing you to these two main characters, Ed and Al, in this isolated environment, the city of Leto, where they're in a bit of a different place, they're not in Central, and then once that bit's over, Al actually is telling the story so far to Rose, is once again kind of a masterstroke in pacing, because what follows is actually one of my favourite episodes, and I've actually cried watching this episode several times, and that's the full episode of flashback to Ed and Al's childhood, where you learn all about the mum, who's essentially the most important character really. She sets everything in motion by tragically dying. Then in the following episodes we get to see the development of the relationship between Ed and Colonel Mustang, which is completely brushed over in Brotherhood. Ed finds Mustang to be incredibly patronising, and Mustang pretty much uses the Elric brothers when he tests them on the train when he knows the terrorists are on that train. And then throughout all the episodes they kind of have this admiration for each other, but yet they find each other incredibly irritating at the same time. This doesn't really get hinted at even until a long way into Brotherhood, and even then it comes out of nowhere because that relationship hasn't really been built up. Something else which bolsters this relationship in the original is when Ed and Al are training and studying to become state alchemists. Mustang is the one that set all this in motion, so Ed and Al really have him to thank for that in the end. This is where we first really get to see the determination of the Elric brothers, and just how talented they are at alchemy when they shock everyone at the exams. Once again, this is something that Brotherhood completely skips over and misses out on. In episode 6, Major Armstrong goes back to Rosenbull with the Elric brothers, and he mentions that they are famous state alchemists. In episode 6, that doesn't feel earned at all. This all culminates in a feeling that pretty much the first half of Brotherhood is treating the viewer as if they already know everything about these characters, so nothing really needs to be set up or built up to. This actually extends to the setting of the anime and not just its characters. For instance, in the original, Central Library was set up to be an already established place surrounding important characters. We got introduced to the character Sheska there when Ed and Al were studying for their exams, and it felt like the library burning down was an important turning point for a lot of characters. In Brotherhood, it's kinda just like, oh, we need to find something out, why don't we go to Central Library? Oh, it's burned. In the original, there were episodes like the one with the mine, where Ed and Al trick the guy by turning the lead into gold, which are in Brotherhood told really quickly, like in one sentence, as if we should already know about that story, and then the characters from that episode come back in Brotherhood as kind of like major characters, which felt jarring to me. On a similar note, Barry the Chopper had at least 1 or 2 episodes where he was causing havoc in the city, and the characters were trying to figure out who he was and track him down. And that made number 66 a really impactful character when he came back into it, and you realised that it was Barry the Chopper's soul attached to that armour.
俺はただ悲鳴を上げるしかなかった。頭の中が真っ白になって、誰かを救えると思っていたなんてとんだ思い上がりだ。俺たちにできることなんて自分の体を取り戻すだけで精一杯さ。そのためなら軍の犬だろうが悪魔と罵られようが構わない。だけどな、本当の俺たちは悪魔でもましてや神でもない人間なんだよ。ニーナ一人救うことのできなかったちっぽけな人間だ。
In Brotherhood, we hear nothing of Barry the Chopper until number 66 explains all his backstory in a exposition dump once again. That's never a better way to tell a story, yet in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, it seems to be the way they choose to tell it most of the time. Of course, Lust is a huge character in the original Fullmetal Alchemist. She takes a bit of a backseat in Brotherhood to Envy, who was my least favourite character possibly in the original. However, Envy in Brotherhood is really, really good. I thought Envy's death scene was one of the most emotional and maybe harrowing moments of the series, and that's when Colonel Mustang's character really starts to shine. It was really tense how the Colonel was clearly out for revenge above all else. He's so angry because when he lost Hughes he thought maybe he was the only friend that he could rely on, but with the help of the other characters, he's shown that he has a lot more friends than he realises. It's a shame that this is the sole episode where the full complexity of Mustang's character shines through. A few other characters lost their spark a bit in Brotherhood, I think. Izumi, who was really against the military in the original, doesn't really seem bothered in Brotherhood about, hanging around with people from the military and stuff like that. She never really mentions it that much, opting to just blurt out her catchphrase of "I'm just a housewife" over and over again. And to reduce such a great character like Izumi to just a catchphrase is such a shame. This is a character that in the original Fullmetal Alchemist was explored in great depth and detail, who at first seems to be a paragon to the Elric brothers, but turns out to be one of the most flawed and sympathetic characters of the whole anime. Obviously you felt sympathy for her in Brotherhood, having lost her child, but the way that the original tells it is so much more harrowing, with the conflicting feelings of Raph actually coming back and essentially being her child, but at the same time being such an evil character and having to be killed in the end, basically. I think that ambiguity of are the homunculi real people, or do they have feelings, which a lot of characters believe that they don't have feelings, is really one of the strongest themes of the original Fullmetal Alchemist, and that wasn't really told in Brotherhood. Homunculi were more these pure evil entities that were kind of inhabiting a human body, really, completely different to the original. So in that sense, the homunculi in Brotherhood are less relatable and less complex, and just serve to be the bad guys of the series for the sake of it, to be honest. And that includes the main bad guy, who I didn't think was that great at all, to be honest. The dwarf in the jar, I believe, is referred to. Again, this is a character that's just pure evil for the sake of it, really. No grey area, no real intrigue behind his character other than where the hell did he come from, which we never get to discover. And it takes its toll on Hohenheim's character as well, which in Brotherhood is basically just an anime trope, a very common anime trope of a doppelganger character. I did love the idea that Hohenheim had been living for so many hundreds of years, and the flashback to see the ancient cities and things like that were really cool. But the original just had it so much better with, Hohenheim and Dante, who we'll get to soon, swapping bodies to be able to keep on surviving all those years. And him never really being that comfortable with the idea, but still carrying on doing it through selfish reasons, really, in the end. And the idea that the more he was swapping bodies to try and live forever, the more of his soul got eaten away, and that sort of outwardly showed with the rotting of his body. That was a really intriguing element to the story. So yeah, the main bad guy in the original was, of course, Dante, who I absolutely love. Starts off as an old woman who seems completely harmless, but then of course transfers her body into a younger woman, as she's also trying to live forever. Just how she manipulated everyone from behind the scenes, and the reveal of her being the mastermind behind it all coming very late in the series. I think it's episode maybe 42 or something like that. Just everything that's been built up to that until that point just is brilliant to me. Brotherhood just kind of plods along. There's two Hohenheims. You're kind of thinking, oh, why does that guy look like Hohenheim? But in the end, I didn't really care because I knew it was just another blooming anime trope. Dante's theme is also one of my favourite pieces of music, which leads me to the soundtrack. The original Fullmetal Alchemist soundtrack by Michiru Oshima is absolutely mind-blowing. It's one of the reasons why I often cry when I return to Fullmetal Alchemist. So emotional, so impactful. with a variety of different styles. And the soundtrack also seems to get more intense as the series goes along, with the addition of things like Dante's theme, just complementing the huge build-up and pacing of the whole series. And you know, I have very mixed, confused feelings about this, because part of me thinks, why the hell didn't they get Michiru Oshima back to do the Brotherhood soundtrack? But then I just think the original soundtrack was so perfect in every way. They couldn't have possibly asked him to just do something new for the same story, essentially. But then again, you know, he can't possibly top it. So the Brotherhood soundtrack to me is boring, lifeless. They use the same track over and over again for like bit of intrigue. If there's any sort of intrigue moment, they will use this same track that's like a repetitive string motif. And I'm sure it's in every single episode, pretty much, you know, and it's just not effective at all. It's not emotionally moving as the original soundtrack was. It speaks volumes to me that is pretty much the one track I remember, just the most repetitive one that is played constantly. Even the movie, which comes after Brotherhood, the second star of Milos, had better music than the series itself. It had a different composer, which the opposite is actually true of the original. The Conqueror of Shambhala had a brilliant soundtrack still by Michiru Oshima, but it wasn't quite as emotional as the series soundtrack. So having said all this, I don't actually think Brotherhood is a terrible anime. Just the first 20 episodes, I believe, are pretty much objectively bad if you really think about it. But around episode 30, shit really hits the fan, and loads of characters start really coming into it and getting really involved in the main plot. And this is where the thing I mentioned about just focusing on one thing in one episode kind of melts away, and we start getting extended sequences and battles which last for many episodes and things like that. And it starts to become a lot more gripping. And this is where a lot of the best fight scenes also happen, such as the fight between King Bradley and Ling Yao. And then pretty much straight after that we have the fight between King Bradley and Scar, which is also awesome. There were some other great characters in Brotherhood. General Armstrong, really brilliant character. And I loved how at first you didn't really know whether she was going to be a bad guy. She was kind of playing along to see what she could find out about the central military by acting corrupt, basically. But then when it came to it, she was actually, you know, for the people, for justice, that kind of thing. And of course she even went so far as to seem as if she betrayed her brother Major Armstrong just to keep up that act, which is a great element to the plot. But after all that, after I was gripped for many episodes, I got to the ending, which I have very mixed feelings about. if not only because I think the ending to the original Fullmetal Alchemist and also the film Conqueror of Shambhala are two of the most emotional endings of anything I've ever watched. I really do think they're both perfect in their own way. So of course both the brothers have been working for years tirelessly to return to their original bodies, and they've been working towards doing that without using human lives as the sacrifice. In the end, Ed and Hohenheim, whilst trapped in the other world, discuss how alchemy might not be the perfect power that they thought it was, when Ed describes his dismay at essentially having to sacrifice himself to bring back Al's body. Nevertheless, it ends on a beautifully bittersweet moment where both brothers resolve to see each other again someday. Then, once that actually happens, they both realise they might have to make that same sacrifice again to save other loved ones. A fantastic moment is when Winry says, "I guess this is goodbye for good," almost as if she's always known that Ed and Al could never be truly at home with her and her grandma. This makes the message inscribed on Ed's pocket watch, "Don't forget 3rd of October," even more poignant because it suggests that they will never have a true home and that Ed and Al just are happy to be together as brothers. And if you think about it, the end of Conqueror of Shambhala, where Ed and Al are trapped in the other world and are now part of a roving band of gypsies, is completely perfect for these two characters. Nothing could have undone the mistake that they made at the beginning of the series, and the ultimate conclusion after all that they sacrificed along the way is that they had to say goodbye to Winry. Now let's compare this to Brotherhood and simplify it a bit here just for argument's sake. Ed suddenly realises that if he sacrifices alchemy, he can fix everything. That's the long or short of it, to be honest, and it's not really that interesting or thought-provoking. It's certainly not as bittersweet or emotional as the original was. It's almost the opposite in a way, with the two brothers going in completely separate directions. And despite Ed and Winry being completely in love and nothing really stopping Winry from going with Ed on his adventures, Winry decides to stay at home for some reason. Then there's the Gate of Truth itself, which turned out to be some sort of inherent power within everyone, rather than a gate to another world as it was in the original, which to me was just full of intrigue and mystery and was an amazing part of Fullmetal Alchemist. In the original, the characters work out that there is no such thing as equivalent exchange in the end, because the power they use to do alchemy comes from the lives of people in the real world, as it were. And that genius element of the story ties in so well with the overall themes of war and the human condition in Fullmetal Alchemist. Brotherhood didn't really do anything as interesting as that throughout its entire series, really.
やっぱりエドはもうどこにもいないのかね。
たとえ人の命を代価にしても人体錬成はかなわないでしょう。あるがあの姿になったのは彼らが費やした4年という月日のすべてを代価にしたということなのかもしれません。
ある最近錬金術の本を読んでいるんだ。昔みたいにまるでエドのことを忘れまいとするみたいにね。それとあのラースという子、ウィンリーがオートメールをつけてあげたよ。エドのために用意しておいたものをね。
今どこに？
いなくなっちまった。
そうですか。
The creator of Fullmetal Alchemist, Hiromu Arakawa, requested that the original anime tell a completely different story than the manga. Whilst I'm unsure of the reasons behind this, the final outcome of that is that Fullmetal Alchemist transcended its source material. This is why Fullmetal Alchemist purists who insist that Brotherhood is better simply because it sticks to the source material are a bit misguided in my opinion. Manga and anime are two different art forms. They can each get away with different things and have different pacing and structure. This is why Brotherhood had incredibly quick and relentless pacing throughout, and kind of forgot the basic building blocks of telling a well-structured story. Whereas the original, despite actually having less episodes, felt so much more of a journey and so much more involved than Brotherhood did. But of course, that's just what I think. If you absolutely loved Brotherhood and preferred it over the original, please do leave a comment below and we can discuss it. Thanks very much for watching, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.